My name is Kyriaki Zirahimona. I'm teaching for the Department of Philosophy. I've been using LAs for the last 2 years. At the beginning, I started by having one LA. Lately, I have two. My class, the course I'm teaching is Introduction to Logic, and every time I have about 70 to 75 students.
So I'm Lisa Bryn. I'm in the biology department. I teach, I've been teaching since fall of 2014 the human anatomy course. I have a large class size of 288 students. And this past semester I started teaching the human physiology course too, and I only have like 120 students in that course.
Hi, I'm Rachel Ritchie. I teach for the psychology department. I'm also the director of undergraduate studies, a fellow with the Center for the Advancement of Teaching, and faculty with the Honors College. I've been using LAs for about 3 years now. I first started in an auditorium of 480 students, and we've been able to downsize our class considerably since we went hybrid. I'm down to about 180 students now, so tiny little class of 180. And I also teach online using learning assistants, and my class size online is about 100 students.
Hi, I'm Uma Swami. I'm from the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. I am a Dean's Faculty Fellow this semester. I started teaching using LAs in 2009, and we followed a very different model for about 5 years. In the spring of 2014 was when I started using LAs in the right way, as I call them. And since then, I have about between 5 and 8 LAs each semester. My classes are usually 204 students. I started out in a regular lecture-style classroom, and since last fall, I have been teaching in the new active learning room. My class sizes are between 200 and 220 every semester.
Okay. What started your interest in your LAs?
Should I start? Okay. Well, I'm teaching critical thinking skills. I want my students, when they finish the class, to have an excellent idea of how to use logical principles, how to identify arguments, how to differentiate between different types of arguments, and so on. So I wanted them to get a deeper understanding of all of these concepts. And I think that the LA program encourages critical thinking. So I think that teaching critical thinking skills along with a method that encourages this is going to make my students have a much better understanding and a better learning experience once they finish with my class.
So for me, I felt initially, or ever since I started teaching human anatomy actually, I feel that human anatomy, if you're going to lecture for 15 minutes in front of students, is a very boring class, right? Students are accustomed to thinking that human anatomy is memorization, and so if you're just lecturing and they're browsing their phones or their computers, then they're not learning anything. And I used to co-teach this course with a professor that went on maternity leave, and my email inbox would always have lots of emails about active learning, and I'm like, I don't even know what this is, but maybe I should try. And I decided to try when she was on maternity leave, and if it didn't work out, then I would go back to doing what we were doing prior to active learning. So that's why I decided to do active learning. And that first semester, I already noticed the difference in DFWs without even analyzing the data. And I was telling the other professor, you're going to have to make changes because this is how we should go. The students are learning better, and she was on board with it, and so that's what we've been doing.
So I have kind of a different perspective as a psychologist. Our pass rate was outstanding in our class before we incorporated LAs. We were at like 92% pass rate. My background as a mental health therapist, I worked at the counseling center here and out in local high schools. And I'm also a graduate of FIU, and graduating from here was a really lonely experience for me. You're sitting in an auditorium of 400 strangers. I never talked to anybody else in my time here. I graduated my undergrad not knowing a single person or forming any kind of connection. And I didn't want my students to experience that. Every semester I had more and more students coming to me and saying how overwhelmed they were, how unsupported they were. And I designed interventions in the high school to improve social cohesion and group bonds. So I looked at incorporating LAs as a way to get agents in my class to improve the communication and create a sense of community in my classroom. The fact that they were learning a lot more than they used to is just an added bonus. They're happier on campus, they come to class more often, and they really feel like they're incorporated into our FIU community.
So, how many of you went to the poster session yesterday? And how many of you saw the poster that had balloons on it? Yes. So if you saw that poster and if you saw that activity, that gives you a fair idea of why I decided to start using LAs and why I decided to start doing active learning. Because chemistry was a pretty lonely experience, as Rachel said. And in addition, our students seem to think that it's all about memorization. They were not learning. They need those critical thinking, problem-solving skills, and it's hard to get those when you're lecturing at them. On the other hand, if you have learning assistants and you train them properly, they will ask them nice probing questions, nice open-ended questions, and they will help in making sure that the students actually understand the material and build those necessary skills. And the added bonus is you now have cohesion within the class. The class is a community to the point that the students sometimes don't even need you anymore, which is great because they become self-reliant. We want them to be independent learners.
Okay, any questions at this point?
I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it.
Kiriaki.
Kiriaki.
Yes.
Kiriaki, beautiful. I remember our discussion from yesterday, and I know you were very passionate about traditional lecture format and teaching,
Yes.
and I am as well. So I'm interested to know how you have, I guess, maintained that aspect in the classroom while also maybe letting a little bit of it go and incorporating the LA and activities in your classroom.
Usually what I do is, many days my classes are about 50 minutes. So I would lecture a little bit, maybe sometimes 20 minutes, it depends on the topic. But then once I finish lecturing, then the students are going to be divided into our groups, our LAs are there, and then we start working on specific assigned exercises. Actually, different types of projects. It depends on the content. Sometimes we have a weekly mandatory session with the two LAs. So we brainstorm about what to do every week. And sometimes all the three of us are going to come up with a list of exercises, possible exercises that the students would find interesting. I start with these, and then onto that I make them a little bit more challenging, and then during let's say the 20 minutes that are left in the class, the 30 minutes, then the students will go through that. Sometimes I do other group activities where I'll ask the students. I'll divide my students into pairs. I would ask a very quick question, and then I would ask them to talk among themselves using the help of my LAs, and they would come up with an answer and so on. So I'm trying to use different sorts of activities along with the LAs. It's been a wonderful, eye-opening experience for me. I think that my students understand the concepts a lot better. They feel freer to ask questions to the LAs than to me. And I think the LAs, because they know how to my LAs at least, know how to probe, how to ask specific questions. They don't give them the answers, but then they try to make sure that they are on the right direction. So I've been very happy and lucky this semester. I have very good quality LAs.
Were you able to create some type of component outside of the classroom
Yes.
to replace that lost lecture time, or did you let some of the curriculum go? You got your
No. I haven't let any curriculum go. I assign readings that students need to do outside of our class.
reading.
And then I test them when they come into class to make sure that they understand what is going on. And also, our LAs, this semester at least, they are also doing office hours. So students, we have quite office hours almost every other day. So students feel very comfortable going to the LAs and, of course, to my office hours. But I think they feel more comfortable going to the LAs. And they ask questions. So they've developed this kind of a very friendly atmosphere in our class. They feel very close to one another, so I really enjoy working. I'm sorry, I took too much time.
I see my colleague Frankie has a
I
comment.
think Frankie and Laurel, you wanted to say something in regards to your question.
Yeah, so I teach 4 different classes. Some of them is more to, like, it's a continuum between like active learning and lecture. So I have the taste of both, like extreme. I understand that like sometimes when you are used to like lecturing, it's difficult at first to kind of let go of some of the content that you think is important.
Bio 1 is such a foundational class, so I feel that way very strongly, actually.
Yeah, we teach introductory psychology, which is the foundation class for all
Yes.
our psychology class. But we also do active learning in that classroom. I think like if you're willing to go into the active learning, you need to kind of like, I think active learning and like the expectation that students would read ahead before they come to class go hand in hand. Like you cannot turn your class into an active learning class without expecting that your students are going to be prepared for the class, because otherwise it won't work. So the way that we do it is then like before every single class we assign like a relatively low stack kind of activity to make sure the student do some basic readings. And then in the classroom, we do mostly active learning. We do lecture a little bit, but usually the lecture is around the activity. So like if we design an activity for the main concept, then we will give them a little bit information about the main concept before they go into the activity. And the way that I try to fit in as many content as possible is through iClicker. So instead of like asking every single concept, I basically turn similar concept into the answer choice. So as I'm going through the iClicker, I'm also cover 4 different concepts at the same time.
And I have found that just because you lecture it doesn't mean that they learn it.
Yeah.
So I have verbatim put things on the exam where I have lectured a beautiful, little thing and then showed a video and then asked a clicker question, and 70% of the class misses a basic definition question because they were looking at their phone or they tuned out.
Sure.
So just because, I can talk really well for 75 minutes. I talk pretty quick. I can get through a ton of material. But it doesn't mean that students are going to get it. So instead of covering a ton of lecture material, we give them questions. We give them things we want them to know. We do online quizzes. And then in the classroom, the time we have with them, we focus on the most challenging stuff because they're going to understand the basic definition stuff on their own, so we could focus on the application in class.
Is it fair to expect first year college students to have that level of independent motivation to?
Absolutely,
Let's
yes.
expand, so let's expand. Sorry to interrupt, let's expand to other disciplines possibly. Laura, you want to say something?
Well, I'm in biology also, and something that you said yesterday struck me in that this idea that what do we teach in these intro biology sequences? There's a ton of content, and it's historically based that that's how it should be. But I think some of it has to go because it's not possible for the students to really get it all. And when an exercise that I did, I was struggling with the same thing you were struggling with, is write down eight questions that if they got those at the end of the semester, I would feel like that things worked out. And then I thought, well, okay, if I was teaching something, is that going to help them get that really super important thing? No, it goes. And then because I did realize that all these things that I was teaching them, they weren't putting them together. For example, we asked something about how does respiration relate to carbon in the atmosphere. They didn't know, but they could diagram the cycle. So they were spending all this time memorizing stuff. But just writing down those 10 questions really helped us decide what do we get rid of, what do we not. And then the task that you have people work on. I read this really cool book, and I don't know if you read it too, Jeff, that Voices of the Mind. You heard about it? It talks about a mediating artifact or a task that you do to learn something and how important that task is. And the task that we give our students and to work on really affects how they learn it and what they think about it. And so I realized a lot of the tasks I was giving them maybe were active, but they were still trivial. One anecdote, and then I promise I'll be quiet. A friend of mine passed away recently, and his son was talking at his funeral. And he said, my dad was really great at helping us learn things in interesting ways. And he was telling me about how he wanted to learn how to use some saw that cut metal. I don't know. It's like, so my dad went and he bought me a car. Not like a $200 junker. Brought it in, it was in the garage. And he's like, don't forget to take the gas can out or the gas tank out, but then go for it. Cut this car in half. And you will learn everything you need to know about cutting with this instrument. And so that task taught him something different than how any other way he could have done it. And so I'm looking for the cutting the car in half task for everything. I don't know. It was inspiring to me. Now I'll be quiet.
Thank you. Christine?
Just a quick question. What happens, and I'm kind of like, what's your name?
Ashok.
Huh?
Ashok Upadhyaya. Ashok.
Ashok. I'm kind of like him. What happens when you assign reading and then you get into class and get ready to talk about it and 60% of your class have not done the reading?
So one of the things, especially since I teach a freshman class too, students want organization. The contents that you put up sends out a very powerful message. On the first day, you have to go in and you have to tell them, this is the way my class works. Buy-in is extremely crucial. This is the way my class works. And they will be assigned reading. You have to hold them to it. Either give them an online assignment they have to complete before class, or as soon as they walk in, have clicker quizzes for them. So they're going to realize that they're going to be held accountable. Don't ever make the mistake of realizing 60% of your class is not prepared and start lecturing.
Well, no, I have given this right afterward, and 60% of them have failed, based on just the reading.
So it may be, do you do a buy-in talk on the first day?
Yes.
And do you hold them, is everything neatly laid out so that they...
Laid out and videos that I think are they're not even reading, they're video.
So I found that adjusting the amount of their grade that comes from showing up to class as prepared, and I've personally found our sweet spot around 30%. So 30% is the homework before class. They have to take a quiz the night before class, that's 10%. They have to bring handwritten notes. Handwritten because it improves their memory. If you're typing it, the whole class is just emailing it around and bringing in a typed copy. So we have them physically handwrite notes to bring with them. The answer to 10 different questions. They show up in class, we start the day with a clicker quiz. If they show up and they haven't done the readings, they haven't brought in their notes, they've already lost 20% of their grade, and they essentially sit there like a lump and can't engage with their group. And then after class, they have 48 hours. We're going on the principles of good memory and test and frequent testing. Within 48 hours of class, in order to refresh their memory and move it into a long term, we have them take another quiz. So they have to retrieve that information.
Right. Let's do that about the structure. Okay, let's try to move the conversation a little bit and try to answer more questions. Sorry for interrupting. Charles, you had a question?
Yeah, actually, because of 10 of the questions, I was really kind of interested in examples. We keep talking about doing it, but in particular, Lisa, I would like to hear sort of, you said it was a challenge because there was an assumption of memorization. So in particular, what type of examples do you have your students engaging in to help foster the sort of the active learning of the students in that class?
So it was interesting because I was hearing all this discussion, and I think that one thing does not fit for all, and I think it's great that we're seeing how everybody has different experiences. And so for me, I have my video recordings online that students need to watch prior to coming to class. They are set up into groups, and I have weekly quizzes that they have to do, and that's 10% of their grade. And like Rachel said, 30% of their grade comes from class activities, so I do 15% clickers and 15% class activities. And the class activities, they vary, it depends. So the other thing is, if you haven't worked with active learning, you're not going to get it right the first semester or the second semester or the third semester, right? So it's a process. And so initially I thought the class activities needed to be fun and interesting, but not necessarily they were making students learn the concepts. So then I sort of changed throughout the years, and now I feel the class activities are directed towards learning. And of course, if you listen to the video recordings prior to coming, then you're able to participate more actively, and that's how you will learn. And I feel like students get it maybe not before the first exam, but they will get it after the second exam or third exam. And my exams are only worth 10% of their grades. So if they don't do well on the first exam, it's okay. You know, they still have time to catch up. And like Uma said, that so Uma was saying how she does clickers in the beginning, so I also do clickers in the beginning. So that's the first thing I do as soon as they come to class, is like, are you ready for your first clicker question? And make sure that they arrive on time, that they come prepared. And if they don't come prepared, then they will not get that concept, you know, initially. And then I always do a clicker question at the end of class to get the students that arrive late. And we put them in groups, and if it's there at the end. So I teach at 3,000 level. It's not freshman, but at the end of the semester, it's like, if they don't do their work, they will not be successful, and they sort of catch up. I only have a 5% DFW now. And started with 45.
And especially if you have LAs, you can use the LAs to do the messaging. The LAs should be telling them, do your homework. That's what caused me to pass this class, or that's what caused me to get an A in this class. They're your cheerleaders. Use them.
How long are the lecture videos?
So the lecture videos, I do them by learning outcomes. So they're short little videos, because I find it's like easier if students know exactly what concept they need to go after, and they can search for like the learning outcomes. And I try to make them like 10, 15 minutes long, and then depending on the topic, then I have 3, 4, 5 videos.
Is that per class or per week?
So we used to meet 3 times a week for 50 minutes, and now we meet twice a week for an hour and 15 minutes.
Right.
So it depends on the length. So I try to make the videos the length of the class time. So
If you don't have time to make videos, search on YouTube and just pick one that works for you. And if there's something in that video that is not the way you teach it, you can put a little note on it on the bottom saying, you know, this is what I need you to know, or stop watching the video at 6 minutes, 30 seconds, whatever you want. So if you're worried about how am I going to record all the videos, just you can start with the ones on YouTube, and then you can build as you go along.
A quick question about the use of learning assistants in the online environment for those of you that are using them, because I'm now predominantly teaching, if not completely, online, and there's a lot of momentum behind that university-wide at UCF. So I just wanted to, how do you create community? How do you structure it? What kind of interaction, those type of things, if you don't mind speaking to that, those of you that are using online.
So I want to start by saying that the difference the LAs have made in our online section is phenomenal. We went from like a 65% pass rate to the online section has the highest percent pass rate. They're at 95%,
Good.
which blows our face-to-face sections away. We only use experienced LAs in the online environment because it makes the pedagogy course really strange for them, so we try to avoid using first-time LAs online. So we have some experienced people who've been on campus before.
Okay, so they are experienced LAs first?
Yes.
Gotcha, okay.
So they have open-ended questions down, they know about on-campus resources, they know what's coming in the course and what we do. My online classes are structured very similarly to the on-campus ones.
Mhm.
They have a quiz midpoint through the week, they have a discussion midpoint through the week, they finish out the discussion and do another quiz by the end of the week. The LAs are responsible for making sure their 30 students have done it. So they check the discussion, and if their students, they each get a little set of 30, if their students haven't posted on the discussion board, they text message them or they WhatsApp them. So I'm a big fan of WhatsApp. I know it's a horrible cheating tool, but we found it really helpful to facilitate immediate communication because they're not going to check the campus messenger. They're going to check their phone constantly. It's always on them. I also found it helpful in my giant 100-person online classes to break them into groups of 10 so that they're only interacting with the same little 10 people the whole semester. And it's been working for us. It creates a good sense of community, and the students in the online sections really love it. The LAs log in every single day, so it's more work intensive than the face-to-face. They log in every single day and they comment on every group of 10 discussion post. Even if it's just like a, hey, you guys are doing really great, but I want you guys to watch this video or I found this resource. So they add a little something to it, and they use a kind of Socratic questioning method to push the discussion forward. And it's been really helpful. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback.
This is great.
I think just interject about online. I think we're trying to figure this out within the LA Alliance and also here at FIU. There's a need for sure to incorporate LAs in online environment, but we're not sure yet how it's going to look like. There are always options. I mean, there are a lot of great options, and I think our faculty across disciplines, from computer science to chemistry and biology, are exploring it. But it's kind of a work in progress. So it's exploration. So I would say that we are not ready to, and maybe my friends can share as well, that to really tell you what are the absolutely best practices when it comes to online environment. We're all at kind of like an exploration phase.
I will tell you that at NDSU we also have LAs and online courses, and we separately have arrived at a very similar model. We do the similar strategies that you're describing in your course. We employ those in our online courses as well, where LAs are managing a small group of students, or facilitating a small group of students, and the LAs for those courses actually report they feel really connected to students, even though they're mostly interacting online. So I think it's interesting that two different institutions still arrive at a very similar model. So.
Can I ask one other follow-up? Just what's the size of your classes?
100 online.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, it's really interesting to think what an interaction looks like online, right? It's like the core of what we do is these interactions between the peers, between the students, and between the LAs and the students. How does it look like? Is it like through giving feedback online? I mean, is it synchronous? Is it asynchronous? So, you know, really interesting questions to explore. Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit to the faculty side. I mean, we're talking about radically transforming classes. A lot of work. Were you, and I see pushback from a lot of faculty members who are very used to doing what they want to do and have done. Were you given any kind of incentive, monetary or course release?
For when I transformed Chemistry 2 first. I was an HMI fellow, I got a course release, I got LAs. And I transformed General Chemistry 2. When it came time in the fall to transform General Chemistry 1, I did not get a course release. But I had enough momentum behind me that they gave me 4 LAs. I was, however, teaching 2 classes. And my LAs were so invested that they said, it's okay, we'll do the second class for you. Because they felt that they were part of a huge deal. And I know not everybody can be lucky, those kids were special. But I did create all the activities, everything, while carrying my full course load for General Chemistry 1. Would I advise other people to do the same thing? No. But you don't have to transform 100% of your class that very first semester. Think about what are the few activities that you can do. You can start by just doing clickers. I know writing clickers is hard, but if you wrote 5 clicker questions or 6 clicker questions per class and use that as a springboard to facilitate conversations in class, that could be a good way to start. So you don't have to go full tilt. And as Lisa said before, you're not going to get this right on the first go. There is going to be a second trial, a third trial. Be kind to yourself. Cut yourself some slack. And your LAs are going to be your best resource, because if you go to these students and you ask them, what is it that you had trouble with in your class? What is it that we need to kind of explore with the students? They will give you great feedback.
I think you have to be ready for catastrophic failure too. I was originally hired as an online instructor, and then they hired me full time to teach on campus, and they kind of threw me into this gateway project. The people that fail Intro to Psych go on to drop out of the university, so it's a really big issue for us. And we did get some special help from the Center for the Advancement of Teaching. But the first time, I finally had the security of being a full-time instructor rather than an adjunct, and I felt like I could do anything in my class, and I was at least protected for 2 years of my contract. So I had the freedom to flip, and it was a horrible failure. The first semester, my students pushed back hard. They hated it because I have these great online reviews saying what a great lecturer I am and how entertaining I am. And now they're showing up to class and I'm not talking to them. I'm just giving them handouts and they can just take those and do them at home. So it was really tough. And I didn't want to do it. After that first semester, I was like, I want to go back to lecturing. This is horrible. I'm spending 1 million hours preparing for this. I'm 10 times more stressed out than when I taught this class online. This sucks. But at the end of the semester, a group of students came up to me and told me about how they had formed new friendships and how much they loved it. And they asked if they could be learning assistants for me because they had seen it in other classes. And so I started kind of stealing LAs from other disciplines because we didn't have any psych ones. So I got some like pre-med people, and I stole some bio people, and I had a chemistry one. And they kind of guided me through the next semester and told me, hold off, do some talking, do some clickers, and then an activity. You don't have to stop talking completely. So a little at a time.
All right, Karen. Rachel, you had said something before about the students being able to create a sense of community and being more engaged actively with other students. Did you find the LA program also was able to maybe identify students that were having trouble on campus, maybe with things like depression and those kinds of issues? Because I know that we have a lot of trouble with that on our campus, and I would imagine that that's something that's probably nationally.
Such a huge asset. My first semester doing this, even in my mess, I had a student who received a call during class that her father had died. She got a text message, just a dad off life support. And I didn't know what was happening. All I knew was a student all the way in the back of my auditorium got up and walked out. And I kind of signaled to the LA, go follow her. And the LA followed her and came back in to tell me what was going on. And we were able to, personally walk that student over to the counseling center. It's also been really helpful. I have an amazing teaching assistant who has found trouble students. She categorizes after our first exam, like our potential students who are in trouble. And we flag them, and the LAs are in charge of asking them, being extra friendly, showing up early to class and asking them, hey, how's it going? What's going on with you? So we found out we were able to get one student into drug treatment. We found 3 homeless students already that we've been able to. We had a student that had a heart attack during the final exam session, like showed up to class sweating and shaking, and it wasn't a panic attack.
Well, your exams are really hard.
Yeah, true, I know.
I'm not sure that's it. But
There's so many students that need accommodations that don't even know that they can get them. They don't even know where to go. They don't know if they're allowed to get accommodations. They don't know they can get insurance through campus. They don't know that we have health specialists on campus. They don't know that we have therapists on campus. They don't know any of that.
At least a half dozen times during the semester, my LA will physically walk someone to the health center or the counseling program or the victim advocacy center.
That's amazing.
And
Lisa, sorry.
I just want to add, because we were talking a little bit about LAs, and I feel that knowing how to use your LAs, especially when you're starting, is key to your success. I mean, I can't stress this enough. So the first year that I started, I was teaching not only my section of human anatomy, but the professor that was on maternity leave. So I had to learn new things. And my LAs, they don't do this anymore, but the first semester, they were actually meeting prior to meeting with me. So they would meet on their own, they would come up with class activities, and then when we met the next day, they had all these different class activities that we could work on top of and try to better them and things like that. I also have my LAs still now write multiple choice questions. So I'm specific on the type of multiple choice questions that they need to write. Like, I don't like all of the above, or A, B, and C, not D, or something like that. So I'm very specific on the type of questions I want. They only need to write one question per lecture, but it has to be a really, really good question. And this question I can use not only as clicker questions, I can use them on my weekly quizzes. I can even use those questions on my exam. And so I create like a data bank of questions that come from my students. I mean, there are just so many things that LAs can do in the classroom besides knowing how to get the students to the correct answer and things like that. But using the LAs outside of the classroom is very, very important. So I couldn't have done my transformation without having the help of the LAs.
You mentioned one, so I'm wondering whether any other incentives have been in place. My second question is that, did you have any professional preparation before you got started with the LA implementation? And do you have any ongoing professional learning community for the faculty members who are in the program? Mm-hmm.
So at least here they were very supportive. They took us to the LA conference in Boulder, and it was a conference similar to this.
Yeah.
And they also offered to pay for us to go to a POGO workshop. I do POGO, process-oriented guided inquiry learning. And so they found the funds to send us for that. This was the very beginning of the course transformation. If you're an instructor, talk to your department chair and see if they would let you go to one of a professional, a conference or a workshop is even better. Try to find one within your discipline. During the time that you're doing course transformation, there's plenty of places we can go for support on campus. We have the discipline-based education research meeting, which is Mondays, 12 to 12:50. There's a presentation every week. But you meet people there who are also going through the process of course transformation, so they're kind of form a support community. That's where I met these three ladies who I'm meeting for the first time. The LA program itself, the STEM Institute, and the Center for Advancement of Teaching are all excellent resources. Hagit's a phone call away, Rocio is a phone call away, or an email away. They're always available, but your biggest sources of support are going to be the other faculty who are kind of dabbling in the same stuff you are. At some point, the disciplinary boundaries blur, and you're just people who are trying to flip your classroom, or you're just people who are trying to use LAs, and you have to set up an active exchange of information with them, say, hey, what are you doing in your class? What am I doing in my class? Sometimes we just meet one-on-one for lunch or coffee. It may be just to commiserate and share our failures, saying, I tried this and this crashed and burned, Or, hey, I did this and this went great, so you should try this too. Mm-hmm. And your learning assistants themselves, they are in other classes that have learning assistants. Mm-hmm. Or they have friends who've been in classes who have learning assistants. So they will give you great ideas, saying, you can do this, or if you're trying to do something, they'll be like, oh, don't do that, that failed in that class. And so you can reach out to that faculty member and say, hey, what happened here? So they may have some insight saying, you know, I tried this didn't work. You don't do this, you can try this might work for you.
So I think that to add to what Uma was saying, I think when we started, or at least I feel like when we started, we used to have end of semester meetings with the teachers that were transforming their course, and these were very useful because we learned from each other. And maybe now the LAs are LAs for other courses, but initially they weren't, so they weren't giving us as much feedback, so we would get feedbacks from each other. But the bottom line is that it's not easy. So don't think it's going to be easy, because it's really, really hard. So there's no amount of money that will make it be easy, right? It's a lot of work. And maybe it's a lot of work for like 2, 3, 4 semesters, 5 semesters, and then it gets better unless you're crazy like me and you decide to do another course. But if you don't, then it gets really, really easy, because you already know what to do, you know how to work with the LAs, and the LAs, again, are the best resource, and it gets easier just because you're more experienced, but it's not easy. It's very, very, very hard.
That's why I asked about the professional development.
Yes.
Yes, they will give you enough there are enough resources out there. But in addition to that, also be advised that this is a drug, it is addictive. Yes. Once you start down this path, you are not going to stop. We all change something in our classes every single semester, because we're like, if I do this, if I change this little thing, my students might learn better. So you're never going to stop.
I just want to add one thing. I have a team, so Frankie is part of my team intro. There's 4 of us. And I kind of modeled what we do after how they teach the learning assistant course. They have weekly prep sessions. So all of team intro, we meet once a week together.
The chemistry team does the same thing.
And we share, because my area of expertise is not the same as Frankie's and the other members of the team. So I can't design lesson plans to cover certain topics they can. And they might not have the area of expertise that I have. So it's been great to build on each other and to test out different things.
We have common exams, we have a common syllabus, we have common curriculum. It may take you a while to get there, but at least if you meet every week and say, hey, this is what I am doing, or this is what we can do. Also, if there's multiple people teaching the same class, try to share the load. Maybe they can create one activity, you can create one activity, and you can all use it in your classes.
And is it an additional weekly meeting to the weekly meeting with the LA? So it is only among professors?
Yes. The faculty have a weekly meeting, and then you go, because there are so many classes of general chemistry, it is impossible for us to get all our 35 LAs in one room at the same time, because these are undergraduates with complicated schedules. So the professors generally meet with their LAs, and in the weekly meeting we will discuss what it is that we're going to tell our LAs, or what is the feedback our LAs give us.
Maybe I can just add here that kind of grooming your group and creating this connection directly with you and following them, kind of also modeling good behaviors, being there on time, face-to-face, and planning and having a consistent structure is very helpful. For example, there's a biology class where the structure is very predicted. I kind of spend some time to try to learn how they do and how come the engagement is so high in their classroom. And what happens, one of the things are that there's an email that is sent on Thursday to the students every Thursday. And then Monday or Tuesday they meet. Monday they meet for planning, they go over the materials, they take turns in prep meeting, they know the materials before, to an extent, not completely, and then they go to class, they go again, Thursday they get the material for next class, so it's pretty consistent, it's predictable. Your LAs knows what's going to come next, and that's very helpful.
Thank you.
Yes.
Frankie. So let's try not to forget that like the LA is not just a resources for the student, but a resource for yourself as well. So you can actually use them to do a lot of different things. So for example, like I understand that like if you have to flip the class or redesign the class, it's a lot of work, but once you get the work done, you still need some kind of feedback about how it's going to pan out for your students. So the first semester I started to use LA, then they are of great use for that purpose. Like I go into meeting with, like before the meeting, I send each of my LA like anywhere between 5 to 10 different activities, and then they are going to rank order all the activities for me to pick the one that they think is the most interesting or the most engaging for themselves. And then based on their feedback, I pick any, depending on the time, I pick any between 1 or 3 activity and go into the planning meeting with them, time them when they're doing the activity so that I get a sense of like how long each activity takes. So if it takes my LA 5 minutes, I add 5 more minutes for my student in the classroom. So when you redesign the class, then LA would be of great use for you to get a sense of, okay, how long this activity is going to take and how much more like lecture I can fit into that activity and things like that.
Just be aware that sometimes things don't go according to plan. This happened to me on Wednesday. Was it Wednesday? Yes, Wednesday. So, my LAs got through the activity in 5 to 7 minutes. I said, okay, my student should be able to do in 20 minutes. No. So you have to make adjustments. You have to think on your feet. Just give yourself a little bit of buffer space. I had built that in. I had built in an additional 10 minutes. So I just decided, this activity is going to the next day. I had one more little activity for them. So build yourself a little buffer time when you're first starting to use LAs, because remember, your LAs are prepped. We picked them because they did well in our classes. We have to think that our students, and these people already know the material. The ones who are going to be doing the activity are still learning the material. So when you first start, give them at least 2 to 3 times the normal time. I gave myself like triple the amount of time, but that still was apparently not enough for that activity.
Okay, so I think
Mary had a question for a while.
I just had a question on community. So when you talk about community, what I usually think about when you meet weekly is you're just giving pointers on how to run the LA program. Do you also share the weaknesses that you've encountered in using the LAs during those weekly meetings?
One thing I'd like to caution people is that please remember that your LAs are students themselves. So our expectations, we have to remember that they have classes of their own. There are times when you see an LA very stressed because they have an exam the next day or there's something going on with their family. So LAs are very hard on themselves. They have very high expectations. So at that point of time, you may have to take them aside and say, it's okay. It's okay if you miss a few meetings. It's okay if you miss a few classes. Or sometimes there are times when I see an LA very stressed and we're having a meeting and I'll say, okay, I need you to leave because clearly you are not here, so go study for your exam or whatever and catch up with one of the other LAs or come meet with me and we'll go over this separately. So that is something that we have to be very cognizant of, that these are students themselves. As far as the weakness of weakness, I would say occasionally we hire somebody who turns out to be not what we thought they were going to be. So you may have to pull them aside and have a talk with them. And if that person is not doing a good enough job, you may occasionally have to have somebody else step in for them. So that depends on who you hire.
Yes, I have a question concern. And my concern is what happens to the students once they finish taking this class, which consists of such a predictable structure, okay, design, and then they get into a regular class. Are they impacted by that? Have you studied that part? Following them after that? Are the DFW going again up after they get out of this very safe environment?
Well, one of the things is you hope you have taught them enough skills that it doesn't matter who they're working with, they will still be okay. That's what I have noticed with my students, because general chemistry is taught completely flipped, completely transformed. With LAs, much of organic chemistry is not. They crave the same kind of thing that they had before. In fact, they come back to us and say, oh, we did not like your class when we were in there, but now we want that kind of class, but we have given them enough skills that they're doing fine in organic chemistry. The fact that we teach them to go prepared to class, the fact that we teach them to go do a quiz after, or a quiz before, they go out and they find the practice problems to take care of themselves. That's also part of the beauty of the LA program.
Actually, sort of a two-part question. The first part was, so you're designing the activities and whatnot, right? So what keeps the students from leaving with their activity or their handout as soon as they get it and bolting? I'm assuming they have to be graded then. And then how do you want to make sure that it lasts until the very end of class? So do you make it like a little bit too long and then, you know, they're going to leave at the end with it? Or like, how are you?
So I can talk a little bit about that, because when I started, right at the beginning, I actually had a layout of everything that I was going to do in that 15-minute period. So I had like 5 minutes for clicker question, then 20 minutes for class activity, and then 20 minutes for, so I had all my lectures, and I had a table where I laid out every single lecture. I don't do it anymore, but that's what I had. You can have extra clicker questions that if you have extra time, you can ask those questions. And I always do a question in the beginning and a question at the end, and sometimes I do, depending on the activity, I do clicker questions throughout the class so then they don't leave. But the bottom line is, when you have a large group size, you're not going to get everybody to stay in the classroom throughout. They sometimes come in the beginning, especially because our class is in PG5, so they have lots of different restaurants in PG5, so they go out and they get their coffee or whatever, their breakfast, and they come back in. And these students won't be as successful if they're not participating of the activities. So it's hard for you to like micromanage everything and make sure that every student is doing what you want them to do. So
I don't know if there's one of the things I have my LAs do is they will collect the sheets, and then people get points based on whether they were there or not. They were helping the students, that they knew they were there. So this is not technically grading, because all they're getting is 0 or 1. And it's only 20, 30 students, so it's not a big deal.
I purposefully make my exercises very challenging, so there's no way that they're going to be able to finish them within the time. Therefore, they have to take them with them and then turn them in as part of their mandatory participation grade. So I make them, so I ask them to work during the weekend, let's say, if this assignment was supposed to, I gave this assignment to them on Friday, they have to turn it in before class on Monday. They have to upload it on Canvas before that time. And this is part of their mandatory participation grade.
Sometimes I do a 5-minute reflection paper at the end if I have a few extra minutes, and I use that for attendance, so I know whether or not they stayed for the whole class too. And then they have to reflect on what they did, which is kind of an extra little, reflection thing, makes them think about what they did, and then if they had any extra questions at the end, I sometimes read through it and see if there's any other questions I didn't get to answer or something.
Yeah, you can even do a 1-minute reflection. It's called the Muddiest Point. What did you get out of this class? What didn't you get?
And I put all together however many questions that we ask is 5 points, and then I think the worksheet is 20 points. So they basically have to stay throughout the class to get the full 25 points for the class participation. And if they leave like right after they finish the worksheet, that might be another 5 iClicker questions they will miss that they didn't get for, or like they finish the first 10 iClicker questions and leave, and they miss the 20 points from the activity. And I did notice that some of the students, like especially those go-getter, as soon as they receive the worksheet, they will start working on that to kind of get it over with. So the way that I do it is that I would tell my LA to hand out the activities in the middle of the class, right before I start the activity, rather than like at the beginning of class, so that they can't just get the worksheet and then sit there, do the worksheet without listening to you, or like they finish the worksheet, toss it on the table and leave. And I have to have them hand it in to the LA so that they can get the grade. If for whatever reason they take them home or like they just leave it on the table, we don't grade it.
Oh, right, so it has to be challenging.
Yeah, it has to be
If
challenging
one person
too.
can do it, they're not doing it. It has to take a group.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't have problems
Need to be
with
graded,
it.
that's something, you don't, because that's too much work.